You're listening to Veeam Partner Perspectives with Eric Doherty.
Welcome to the Veeam Partner Perspectives podcast. I'm Eric Doherty. Joining me today is Michael Stafford, part of Veeam's VASP or Veeam Accredited Service Provider team. Michael, thanks for joining me today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role here at Veeam?
Sure, yeah. I've actually been in this industry for just shy of 30 years now, and I've actually been at Veeam. It'll be 11 years next week. I came in here, started on the sales side of things, working with our management pack product. Went from there over to the alliances group where we did intra-vendor relations, building solutions out. And then from there, ended up going over to the professional services team, where I have been for about the past 3 years. I am the senior solutions architect on that team.
Cool. You have a long storied career, which is always makes for good stories and good insight when we're talking on things like this. So the VASP program, it's got some history and it's kind of existed in some different iterations over time. Can you explain where it came from and kind of how it's evolved into the program that we see today?
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been around for probably about a year since before I got on with the program. So we're talking, around 4.5 years now at this point. And it was interesting how this came about. Veeam makes great software. We do a lot of great things, but if you don't deploy it correctly, then nobody has a great experience. And this is something that was noticed, as features got added, as more capabilities were put in there, the product got to be such that expertise was required to get it right? Yeah. And as you know, I mean, if we have a customer who tries to put in Veeam on their own, for example, let's take any major enterprise for example, and they do something wrong, then automatically you're going to think, okay, well, great, this is a product that's not very good, doesn't work right, and they have a bad experience. So the idea was floated a while ago for these large enterprise customers, or just anybody who needed help, really, to put together a services organization to where when things got implemented, it was automatically to best practice because that's how we design things. Turns out we don't scale that well when it comes to personnel and the amount of work that we had. So, the VASP program was born. And essentially what a VASP is that's a partner who has been certified to be able to go in and deliver a Veeam solution to our standards and to best practice. One of the things we found with that is we have a lot happier customers. And it also gives these partners who, even before getting involved with Veeam, may have had, touch points with their folks. This gives them another touch point to not only get this product installed correctly, but it also gives them an opportunity to potentially become a trusted advisor on what account they get into. I've seen it many times where they've been brought in to do a Veeam implementation, and the next thing you know, they're working on storage, or they're working with network, or any number of different things.
You kind of need to know so much about all those components anyway in order to do a successful Veeam implementation.
You really do. I mean, we rely on the network, we rely on DNS, we rely on hardware, all of those things. So just as part of being in a Veeam deployment, that means you're going to get a look at literally everything a customer is doing. Yeah.
And it's interesting because, the way you described it as, I think we did ourselves a disservice back in the day with that. It just works. And the simple thing, it's like, yeah, you know what? In a small scale it is. And yes, you could be up and running and backing something up in an hour. Mm-hmm. I always describe it as like there's a second half of that sentence, which is, but it takes a deft touch to get it working correctly and optimally.
Exactly.
And that's where the professional services come in from our partners through programs like this.
Yep. And another interesting thing happened, 2.5 years ago, I guess. We had been doing direct services for customers. And it turns out that really doesn't fit our business model very well, especially since we're 100% channel. So we became very partner focused to where Veeam no longer delivers direct professional services. It's one of these things where we specifically have our partners do it. Now, the cool thing about the VASP program is you're not really on your own by doing that, right? So if you're a certified VASP, and there's a couple of things you have to have a certain amount of people certified. I believe it was 2 engineers and architect with some other things. But by doing that, one, we verified that they know what they're doing. And we verified that they're going to be able to deploy and design something correctly. But they still might need help, right? So one of my best partners, I'm quite literally on a call with them at least 2 or 3 times a week, walking them through things that they may not actually even have access to. So as being part of the VASP program, you're also assigned what's called a professional services advisor. What I would call that realistically is your one trusted advisor in Veeam to get you whatever answer you want. By the time it usually gets to me, it's also something that a partner wouldn't necessarily be able to handle. For example, hey, we're seeing this weird thing, and we go look and find, oh my gosh, there's a bug. It's been it's been support fixed it, and you have to call in for, the hot fix or whatever. But we're able to circumvent and short circuit quite a bit of that by doing that.
Yeah.
So it gives us the ability to not only make sure that any partner delivering this is delivering it to best practice so that the customer gets the best experience they can, but it also gives the partner a fantastic resource for any questions they have. I've got some calls this week with some folks who are not necessarily cloud native with the way that they deploy things, but they're able to do it because we're kind of riding shotgun on this thing to make sure they get it right. It's not unusual for my day to be helping a partner do one thing, and then jumping on and going through an architecture to make sure we didn't miss anything, reviewing documentation, all that good stuff. So
it's one of those things where the partners that are being selected for this program can be trusted to do the design and architecture for the vast majority, if that's VAST, VAST, majority of opportunities. But the nice thing is that as part of the program, they have access to have it checked off if they're like, hey, this is something unique. They have the ability to have a team that can support them with that above and beyond what a typical gold, silver, or platinum partner may have, even though I think a large majority of our platinum partners are VASP partners as well.
Oh, I'll actually talk about a little bit about the process there. So that's the other thing that we offer is, especially when we come to the Accelerate to Veeam program, we'll do an architecture review. In fact, it's one of those things which we find to be very, very helpful. I can't tell you how many times, we've had architectures come in and look great, except for this one little thing, right?
Yeah.
And being able to catch that and getting enough eyes on it, it really virtually guarantees that the customer is going to have a whole lot better of an experience just because, obviously the more eyes you get on something and plus, when we're talking about the PSAs, the guys on my team on average have 25 years in the industry. So you're not only dealing with somebody who knows Veeam, you've also got somebody who's dealt with
a seasoned, battle-hardened vet.
Exactly.
Seen it all. Yeah.
The guy who's been in the server room at 3:00 in the morning trying to figure out why it's not booting. We've got a whole bunch of those on the team. So, we bring not only the technical knowledge, but we also bring the seasoning that would go behind it to know not only what to do, but also what not to do. That's another big part of it. And with Accelerate to Veeam, we also have a process where we will actually vet the architecture before it's even deployed, especially since, Veeam is providing funding for that. We want to make sure it goes perfectly.
Right. So we'll talk a little bit more about Accelerate to Veeam in a second, because it's definitely an important topic with this. But so as you talk about VASP, it sounds like something that anybody who's doing Veeam services would be interested in being a part of. And you already alluded to it with the certification component of it, that you need to have at least 3 people, or I guess a minimum of 2, one of them holding 2 certs, because you need to have 2 VMCs and a VMCA.
Correct. Yep.
Able to, to complete those tests. And that's kind of but that's just the technical side of it. What do you look for in these candidates other than the ability to have a few people on staff for this? What makes a good candidate for the VASP program?
Engagement. I would say that. We do have quite a few partners who came forward and wanted to be VASPs, and then they just never did anything. So for us, obviously, engagement is important for a couple of reasons. One, we want to know what you're doing just to be helpful. But 2, that kind of engagement is going to be necessary for us to be able to deliver, hot topic information. All right, I'll give you an example. We have one customer who was trying to do, and this is kind of an ugly thought, but they were trying to do a backup copy job from one data domain to another. Now, if you've ever worked with a data domain, it's a fantastic piece of hardware, but
So they're doing it in a way that it would have to dehydrate and rehydrate and dehydrate.
That is exactly correct.
Gross. Okay.
It was gross. It was gross. We got it done. And but there's scaling questions that come with that. There's how many resources do you get to specific things, for example, and so the rehydration is one piece, but consider this: how do I write to a data domain? I have to use a gateway to write to a data domain, and if I'm doing a copy job, not only am I using one gateway process, I'm using two: one for the read and one for the write, which means that I have to change the way I scope things out based on that. Now, we've got the experience where we've run into that. How many partners will?
Only the ones that you ran into it together with before, and that's a short list, I'm sure.
Exactly. So when it comes to like the architecture phase, for example, it gives me the ability to catch that before it's a problem. That's a great example. Another example would be backup from storage snapshots. This is one of those things where I've actually had to help out partners because they while they understand the technology and they're great at it, they may not understand the nuance behind it. So here's an example. I had one customer who was doing backups and storage snapshots for every single machine they had. We support it, but it's a matter of could you versus should you, right?
Yeah.
So for backups and storage snapshot, for example, it's the resources that are required to actually get the snap and do the metadata mapping and all that good stuff. It does add layers of complexity to things, and it does add some overhead to it. That particular thing is a great idea for a machine that can't handle a stun. But if I'm backing up like a web server that doesn't change much, I don't need it, right?
It's going to be faster to do it in the hypervisor.
Exactly. It's not really something I would need to worry about stressing my storage on the back end for. So it really does come down to what is the hot list of things that we've run across that you probably shouldn't do. And they're not even necessarily going to be published because they're one-offs.
Yeah.
But one of the things I've also noticed about this, and this is maybe it has something to do with me being involved with this team for as long as I have. As soon as I see it once, within the next 3 weeks, I see it 5 or 6 times.
It's like that's the hot thing to do when you're in your designs all of a sudden.
It is. I've run it, or if there's if you run into a bug, for example, which they do happen. I mean, software companies have bugs, but if I run into a bug, I'll run across it with one person or one partner, and then within 3 days, I've got it 4 other times somewhere else. So we're a quick access to that information, even before it even makes it to a KB article, for example.
Yeah, well, and that's a huge thing as being a VASP. Like they're going to have that knowledge. You're going to have that inroad that's going to help a little bit with getting, at least knowing that it is a software issue, and no matter how many times how long that you and the partner sit together, you're not going to solve the problem. You need to get software involved, and you can do that.
Yeah.
That helps for sure.
It really does. And the other cool thing about this is we're very accessible for these guys. I can't tell you how many times I've had a VASP out in the field. In fact, 3 of them today, as a matter of fact, with a question on something, to where rather than call support, they call me directly. All of my partners have my direct phone number. So if there's an issue, they call me directly. And I mean, just being internal and being in touch with people, you're able to get an answer really quickly.
Yeah.
We've had that for quite a while on the sales side of things, but as you know, on the sales side of things, they won't get into the weeds quite like you will in implementation.
Well, even in my role, we're reluctant. We will help with some technical concepts, but we don't get into the specifics of a customer design as somebody who's channel facing. So It's very interesting. And then even still, once it's post implementation, our sales teams aren't necessarily going to get involved in managing it. We really do rely on support for that because we don't want to trample on each other's responsibilities, and support has access to information that we may not have access to in the field as far as, again, we've seen that before. We have tons of wiki articles on it, things like that.
Yep, exactly. And I run into this every day. And it's also really great. We were talking about earlier with, just with having the touch points and having the engagement, that's the other thing. The more engagement I have with a partner, the better they are at delivering.
So here's a question for you on that, because I can see where for this there's engagement from a couple different ways. So there's the technical side,
Mm-hmm.
and there's also the sales side. So who are the target people to be the points of contact for each of those sides? Because I feel like when I've seen some things with VASP in the field, it gets targeted at the wrong person, and that's kind of where the communication breaks down. So who is the right person in a general sense for engagement for a VASP program?
So for the VASP program, it would all start realistically to begin with, you go to Pro Partner and then you go to the VASP page, and there's going to be all the criteria that you would need to sign up there. Once you actually get accepted into the VASP program, there's several different names that are going to come up. Me would be one of them. They will be assigned a person who is going to be their direct one person contact, as well as some escalation points, right? So, for example, if on some odd chance I actually take a vacation day, for example,
don't do that.
Yeah, when was the last time we did that, right? So on the odd chance I take a vacation day, then you'll have a backup contact and my manager and my engagement manager's information as well. The whole point of this is you're not going to be left hanging in the field without an answer. I've done professional services prior to coming to Veeam. I did it for about a decade. And I can't tell you how many times I ended up sitting in that server room going, boy, if only somebody would answer the phone for this one obscure piece of information that I need. And really, this program allows you to get past that, right? It's a pretty amazing thing when, and the customers have commented on this as well, when they've got somebody and they run into an issue on premise, like, oh my gosh, we hit this error, what are we going to do? And 5 minutes later, I'm on the phone with them and we've got it fixed in 20 minutes, right? As opposed to spending 3 days on the call with support.
Right.
There's a lot of value in being able to do that. And personally, I take a lot of satisfaction in being able to see those good outcomes. Circling back on the purpose of the VASP program, it is to facilitate good outcomes for customers so that they not only enjoy what they bought the product for. I'll also bring this up. Not only are they going to be getting what they bought the product for example, like, hey, I need to make sure I got all my backups, right? Okay, great. Well, did you know we do DR? And these are the kinds of these are the kind of questions that as a PS engagement person, you could ask that. And then all of a sudden your week of deployment turns into 2, because then you've added disaster recovery on there. Or, hey, wait, you guys are out there and you find out, well, you're also using O365. Well, what are you protecting that with? Well, there's another possibility. Say, for instance, you're one of the unicorns that has a sales organization as well as a PS organization. Then you've got potentially your PS folks farming the account for you. It's amazing.
Well, that happens so often, and I come from the similar background, and it was always, and I was an SE, and then I worked up into like managing SEs and things like that, and it was always that case. It was tell the guys as they go out in the field. I say guys generally, keep your head on a swivel. Look for what else is out there. What else isn't working. And so many times the SE that's out there doing the deployment would call back to the account rep and be like, hey, they got such and such, and I'm hearing a ton of complaints about the way they have it implemented. And somebody's phone is ringing within 20 minutes of that to have a conversation about it. So your SEs are your best source of your next opportunity within a customer. So if you can get them out there and looking into things and overhearing conversations, you're going to get something additional.
It's funny. Back when I was doing consulting services prior to coming on to Veeam, I can't tell you. And the company I was working with, we sold no software. It was only 100% services. But I can't tell you how many times I would go into into an engagement, and we were working on what we were working on, but we saw what else was going on, right? So, for example, what's a good example? Here's a Veeam one, as a matter of fact. So we went in and we started putting Veeam into place. And as we were looking, I say we, as the partner was looking around in there, they noticed that they were having some issues that were directory related, Active Directory. Well, come to find, and by the way, they didn't just deliver Veeam. They offered Microsoft services, VMware. A big shop does a whole lot of different things. And as they were in there, they noticed these other things. And this 1 week engagement to deliver a small Veeam implementation for a department turned into a 6-month health check and remediation gig with actually, what did they call it? They call it a modernization audit. It was a modernization audit with a digital transformation was just tacked on because the engineer happened to notice what was going on. So I've heard of some pretty magical things happen. And I mean, especially today, right? Everybody is so short staffed out in the field right now. I almost feel sorry for a big organization that wants to deploy a new technology, be it Veeam or anything else, just because the learning curve with being as streamlined as they are.
You don't have the time to learn something new. You're spending all your time maintaining what's old.
Yeah, exactly. Fighting fires, anything like that. I mean, there have been services that we've done for like our cloud partners, for example, where the cloud partners are so adept at what they do. That's great, but they're running so lean that nobody has the free cycles to add another repository. I've seen that. So there's a couple of different places where that could play in. It could lead to trusted advisorships. It could lead to all of these different things, which again, take us back to the same goal, which is one, get it implemented correctly so that everybody has a great experience, not only, Veeam selling the software to begin with, but the customers getting everything that they paid for and getting all of the functionality to the fullest based on what their requirements are.
It always amazes me how many customers out there using our products are using a fraction of them. I always say it's like buying the Swiss Army knife and only using the one blade, never looking to realize that it has 10 other blades that are useful in there.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that as well. We had a VASP go out to do a health check, right? So, and this was a service provider, which is, again, one of the many lines of business we deal with, but it was a service provider who had put Veeam into place for one thing. And they came out and did the health check and started asking questions. And everybody at the service provider was like, you can do that? We didn't know that worked that way. And in this case, again, it was going back to replication. They did not know that you could also do replication to a service provider. And just based on that one visit, they opened up
right there in the name of the product.
Exactly. But based on that one visit and that one health check, they opened up an entire new line of revenue based on functionality they didn't even know was there. So
that's why you make sure you're talking to folks about this, and again, like you said, make sure that you have the education level up on the folks that you're putting out in the field to do not just that one thing, but I said earlier, head on a swivel.
Yeah, and again, with these touch points in this engagement, they are going to have a leg up on just about anyone else, just because as things come out, about it.
They're learning first.
Quicker, yeah. I mean, realistically, the PS folks are going to know about it before the channel does, just because it matters a lot more over here. Because
I would fully expect. I mean, information has to flow from somewhere, and I would think that you guys are at the heartbeat of what's going on in the company in the VASP program, so I would expect that. So that makes total sense.
Yeah,
I have a question for you. Actually, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it was just something I thought of. So, from a technical standpoint, we see what's needed. What do how you interact with folks? What's needed back from the customer from a sales and ongoing reporting standpoint to keep the relationship going? So, you've talked about engagement is the big thing, but how is that engagement maintained? Because I think that's also an area where I've seen things kind of slip up in the relationship as well. Not so much in the technical. The technical folks seem to usually have communication going. It's on the other side of the equation that it seems to. Yeah,
once the sale is closed, at that point, it's move on to whatever's going to be the next thing. I get that. So here's what I've seen historically, and it's worked really well. I always recommend for when somebody actually scopes out a project, we have the length of the project, which is generally the architecture creation for whatever amount of time that is. You've got the actual implementation, followed by testing, followed by the sign off. I always like to advise my folks, my partners, when they do finish up a project, I always advise that they schedule a touch point sometime down the road. I generally don't like to go out more than a quarter or 6 months. There's a few things that I've learned over the years. One, data is going to grow. It does not shrink.
Mm-hmm.
It will never shrink, which means that, a 1 day health touch point every 6 months is a great way to do things. With regard to sales, though, if we're talking from a professional services standpoint,
Like to know that the next thing's coming in, like you
yeah,
said, that usually everybody comes in and they're gung ho. They get into the program and and part of what initiates it is I've got, this great deal. And again, next topic we'll talk about is ATV. I've got this thing and it's eligible for Accelerate to Veeam. We get through that project. How do we keep the relationship going past that first project?
So here's how I recommend it, and this is one of the things which is both wonderful and horrible about Veeam, is our release cycle. We're very fast with it, right? So there's not only are we fast with it, but it's generally not just bug fixes; it's new features, right? So, for example, CDP, for NAS backup, any of these things. So you go back to version 9, we didn't have NAS backup. Version 10 rolls out.
Barely had any cloud features in version 9.
Cloud features, Kubernetes, all of these different things, Kasten, all of it. So when we're talking about engagement with the way that our release cycle works, not only do you have something to go talk about if whether or not you're still healthy, but you've got new features and new products every couple of months that you can go and say, hey, you're using Veeam, you're happy. Look what else we can do now. And there's not only is it your not only through the VASP program, you're going to get educated on this, and you should also get that from the channel as well. But it's also going to give you, I hate to say this, but the excuse would be a good way to, or the opportunity, I guess I would say, to actually have that touch point where, hey, let's see how you're doing. Oh, and by the way, did you know this? So here's an example. We had a health check with a partner. It's been probably 2 years ago now. And they went in, and as they did the health check, they noticed, hey, do you have any unstructured data in here? Oh, guess what? Veeam now can back up your unstructured data. So it's kind of like an organic relationship, right?
Yeah.
So with the way that the release cycles are, and with the new functionality and the new things to sell, PS gives you a valid and real reason to go talk to these guys just to make sure they're healthy. Everybody wants to know, can you tell me if we're doing all right? I have never had anybody turn down a health check.
As well they should, because there's nothing in IT that is set it and forget it. If you're doing that, especially with your backups, that means if you're setting them and forgetting them, it means you're also not testing them. And we could have a whole other conversation about recovery testing and things like that.
Well, okay, so if you're setting them and forgetting them, think about this. Say I build out a dynamic job.
Yep.
I set it and forget it. And then all of a sudden, these dynamic jobs, let's say it's tag-based, for example. I've got a tag-based job, and it says any machine that's in this site goes into this, or owned by this. Okay, let's say any machine tagged with finance goes into this backup job. Okay, what happens if finance purchases another company and all these machines get tagged? Guess what? Now
your backup window's shot. Your recovery capabilities are in question. Your capacity's in question.
Everything's in question.
Yeah.
So it really does bring it's that alone is a reason to get a checkup every 6 months.
Yeah.
Right.
And like you said, it's a conversation opportunity. And I think that it's something that partners should definitely always be considering as a way to, it's not the end of the project. Use it as a relationship. And I think you brought up a great point. Schedule that next touch point as part of closing the project.
Exactly. We'll see.
Hey, we were going to come back. It's February now. Let's say we'll be back in July to take a look. Why don't we put it on the books right now? We'll take another look, and then we'll review the findings, see if anything needs to be altered. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, and it works quite well. Literally every time I've ever seen it done, it has led to more work. Not necessarily Veeam work, but that's okay too, because if you get a PS organization, you don't want a bench. You want everybody out working.
Yeah. Worst thing you can have is a full bullpen. Yeah.
Exactly. If I remember back in the day, if I wasn't hitting 70% utilization, then I wasn't doing my job.
You're hitting the curb.
Yeah, exactly. And and one of these things that I also see quite a bit in these organizations is not only do these people have dispatchers who send them out to do stuff, but I remember back in the past, it was in my best interest to go find more work with where I was doing it. And to be,
it was good to be the guy that could keep yourself busy.
It was great. It was great, and to be fully transparent here, there were times when I would find people who were great to work with, and I would spend a little more time trying to get them more services just because
You
they
like
needed
being
the
there
help.
with them.
Also, they were just great to be around, or they had the big pizza restaurant or
I
whatever.
get it.
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, it's one of those things where it gives, not only does it give the salespeople something, but it also gives the professional services folks themselves the opportunity to create um, busy cycles for billing to be able to get the customer where they need to be.
Yeah. And even if you're doing something like that follow up as a non-billing activity, at least somebody is active and potentially creating the next opportunity out of spending 4 to 6 hours reviewing something for a current customer. And like you said, something comes out of it that's going to get people off the bench again.
Yeah.
Well, there's always things, train your young guys, train your new folks, the greener folks to do those health checks.
Yeah.
And it's a chance for them to get out and get introduced to customers and cut their teeth a little bit.
Yep. And it's kind of funny. I just thought of something. So they had this saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And that is true, but not in consulting and not in IT sales. You really do have to be in front of the customer.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Front of mind. If you're not out of sight, out of mind is more the phrase, I think, for consulting.
Pretty much. So again, especially, when all of the pandemic started and whatnot, getting in front of customer and keeping touch with the customer, as I've seen, and just looking around the industry, that was the make or break thing for a lot of companies.
Yeah.
So, just the opportunity to just stay in touch is huge.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And finding a way to maintain those relationships. Because at the end of the day, it is relationships. Relationships part of not only the service sales, but the service delivery.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The people you put out there to do the work, it's not only about their technical skills. You could be, if you're technically great and you're a jerk, they're only going to remember you were a jerk. They're going to forget about the other part.
Yeah, that's true. But, and that's one thing I'll also say here is with good consulting companies, when you go out and do a good job, and again, as part of the VASP program, you're going to be trained to do this. But with a good consulting company that gets it right the first time, something else comes up. Who are they going to call?
Not the ones that are trial and error on your dime. Yeah.
Exactly.
They're going to call the ones that get it right the first time.
Exactly. Follow-up work. That's the other thing. We were talking about these different partners. I just had one partner that some time ago went out and did a VBR deployment, and they did a fantastic job with them. Customer called us up and said, "Hey, we want to do VDRO. Can we get this partner to come out and do that too?" So we reached out to the partner. They had the free cycles, and lo and behold, they're on the books.
That's great.
That's the other thing that happens in the VASP program is we will send you work. We have more than we know what to do with.
And I think, that's a very good point, I think, for people to realize. And I think it also helps us tie back into Accelerate to Veeam and getting opportunities out to partners. But I'll start with the bench of work that people have realized it's not just their work, but you can go out and deliver services. There's a few ways, and I've been involved in some of it where, and I was talking about a little bit before, where you have that weird world of it's post sale, so you're not necessarily going to get the field sales SEs involved. It's a little too much for the customer to handle. They call support. It's not really a support issue because it's a config issue because they decided to forego the professional services. Now they realize they really need them. And I've seen where we have tickets that really are, kind of designated as let's have VASP take a look at this because they really need professional services. And so there's opportunity that's just sitting there queuing, looking for a partner that wants to do it. And I think that partners who are looking at the VASP program need to realize it's not just what do you bring? It's a two-way street.
Oh, yes.
You bring your own opportunities into the VASP program with some of the nice deals that are in there, and you get that extra touch to know that you're putting out good solutions. But when you prove that you can do those good solutions, you're also going to get things coming from our bench to you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The more we get to know partners, I know who I can trust, and who I can trust, I'm going to call them up when something comes up.
Which goes back to that communication and engagement. The ones that aren't reaching out and communicating, engaging with the folks on our side all the time aren't going to be the ones that are going to get tossed that work because they're like, I don't know anything about these folks.
Yeah, don't. It's like, well, they they sold one thing and they delivered one thing once. Do they even employ a VCSP or a VMCE anymore? Do they even employ
Right.
it? So and it gives them the opportunity to have a relationship with us. Like I said, for me to have an issue, if I don't know the answer, I'm probably going to the developers with it.
Right.
I mean, name another partner organization where you can do that.
It's rare. We have internally, I think, a unique access to be able to do that, and I think that's something that, especially as you work your way up the chain as a channel partner and a service provider, service delivery company, you get to take advantage of. And that's but part of that is, again, two-way communication and making sure that you keep us apprised as a partner of what's going on with the opportunities. How are you leveraging Veeam? What's out there? Because you can't help them with it if you don't know about it.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing gets me more thrilled when I get a proposed architecture from a partner and I can actually read through it and say, yep, that's a great idea, do it. Or, hey, did you consider this? I never tell anybody they're wrong. I just ask, hey, have you considered?
Well, I'm going to guess that they're never completely so blatantly wrong that you go, oh my God, no, big red. I'm just shading the entire thing in with my red pen.
Well, that has happened. That has happened. We have had some instances where they've been a VASP, but then they sent the junior guy to write the architecture.
Not the guys who went and got the certs.
On the good news though is we're able to catch it, right? So again, we make sure that we don't have any bad customer experience just based on that, right? So that's a huge thing. I can't really. There really is no downside here.
Yeah. So let's talk about one of the big upsides that folks see in this program that I think gets a lot of people licking their chops for it, and that's Accelerate to Veeam. You explain what Accelerate to Veeam is and why it's so appealing to VASPs.
Yes, absolutely. So Accelerate to Veeam. This is going to be a very tacky way to put this, but it's free money. So this program was conceived a little over 2 years ago. It was right after we went to the partner delivery VASP model, where any deal, I want to say as of right now, it's over 100K, but any deal that's over that size can qualify for up to 10% of funding for the implementation. Depending upon the size of the deal, that may cover the whole thing, may not. Really, again, it all depends. Like, for example, if I have a VBO implementation, say $500,000, well, there's no way you would need
probably not a 50K implementation.
No, we're talking like 2 or 3 days tops.
Right.
But let's go into something even more interesting. Let's talk about VDRO. There's a lot of moving pieces to that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something where when a customer's forking out the kind of money for that, you really got to get that right. So what we offer is, again, anything over 100K, up to 10% of that will be eligible for funding. Actually, let me back up and say one thing. We have to be replacing an incumbent solution, although realistically, I've never gone and done it.
I was going to say, it's either if they're not already Veeam, then you're not doing this. But if they're not never backing up again in their history of their company. So if we're not upgrading ourselves, we're replacing an incumbent at this point.
Exactly. We used to call that prayer-based backup when I didn't have a backup solution. But yeah, so what is essentially you go in there and you find one of our competitors out there, for example, and companies getting ready to relicense, and rather than re-up, they want to jump to Veeam because it just works. I just said that, didn't I? But they want to jump over to Veeam, and so for anything over 100K in sales, you can get up to 10% of that. Usually, that is enough to get you most of the way through an implementation. Keep in mind there will be some outliers where it's like some gigantic thing where it's just going to take more hours than not. But I can only name maybe a handful of those I've ever seen. But for the most part, we're able to take care of that pretty well. And with Accelerate to Veeam, there's a couple of criteria. One, you have to be a VASP, which means that you have to go through and get all the certifications, and you have to be accepted into the program so that we know you're good to go. You know exactly what you're doing. The deal has to be qualified for it. And by the time the deal is actually sold, here's the other fun thing. As a partner, you don't chase this. The VASP thing, the A to V thing, actually happens during the sales process. So as soon as they're getting ready to sell this deal, the salesperson would actually contact one of the management on my team and say, "Hey, we've got this deal. Can we get qualified for A to V?" So as part of the sale, services are already included. So quite literally, a VASP has to show up and pick up free money. I hate to put it that
sometimes that's how it is, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. Now, keep in mind when they do that, there are some criteria. We have to make sure that the architecture is good to go. We do verify anything, especially if we're paying for it. We make sure that it's that it's in good shape, and that the architecture sized correctly, and we've hit all of the weird things that may have happened. Like for example, like that data domain to data domain thing we just talked about. We would call that out on the architecture. Say, "Are you really sure you want to do it this way?" And give you some potential other ways of getting around it. So yeah, A to V is a great vehicle for that, and it's one of those things where we get. I'm going to say last year we had. Let me see. I wrote this down. We had in A to V. We had 66 A to V deals last year, totaling in. Well, I'll say it was north of $1 million, shy of $2 million in services that we paid for.
That's significant. That's nice.
Yes. 66 A to V deals were 66 times, and this was last year where we weren't really socializing this with the partner community that much.
Yeah.
These were 66 deals that were paid for by Veeam for them to go out and deliver services.
And those are just the ones that were identified and brought in. So there's more out there that could have qualified in all likelihood. So it's something that people need to be aware of as they're looking at larger deals. So when they start getting into 6-figure deals, they should be thinking about it. But there is the other side of this sometimes that comes up. And that's where a partner doesn't necessarily, they have that 6-figure deal, but they don't really meet the criteria to be a VASP, or they're not a VASP at the time that the deal's starting. Maybe they just don't have the bench. They have the skills, but that one guy has the skills. How do you take advantage of that program? Because you want to remain competitive when you're bidding for it, so you don't want to lose out.
I do have a couple of VASPs who do no sales whatsoever. They are 100% services. And in a situation like that, one of the things that I have found is that is the perfect marriage, right? So they sell the deal, they get the A to V funding, and there's I won't name names, but there's a few of them out there that will actually be subcontracted under this deal to deliver the services. Happens all the time.
Yep.
And again, we've got our go-to VASPs who do an amazing job. There's a bunch of them. Some of them will even have relationships. In fact, I know of two off the top of my head who only do delivery, who have since then actually gotten partner agreements themselves with the major channel partners, the big resellers. Think of somebody with the name on the building in New York. You probably figure it out.
Sure.
But they've been brought in specifically to deliver services under contract, and it's their go-to partner. So not only do they have stuff coming from us, but they may have smaller deals that need services that may not even qualify for Accelerate to Veeam, where they're still getting brought in on the deal by the seller.
So the seller needs something above the typical SMB deal that they're usually doing. They're starting to sell a little upmarket, but they don't have the bench that can support it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing that all the time.
Okay.
I see that on a daily basis, actually. In fact, one of my partners right now, they like Accelerate to Veeam, but the majority of the revenue is being driven by this other seller.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah. Organically, some amazing ththings are happening right now.
That's great. It sounds like a program, and I have a few partners that I'm talking with about it, especially as the one piece we didn't talk about that requiring that VMCA. You were integral in the team that rewrote the VMCA for the current version, and
yes.
It was first off, love it. I took it. I thought it was fantastic. I've given you my praise for it in the past, and I've gotten that same feedback from partners that have taken it. So I want to put it out there that anybody that is looking at this program that is afraid of that exam, don't be. Don't be. It is not the old exam.
Actually, let me talk about that just for one quick second here. That's something else I'm doing for the VASPs. It's not really on the books, but we will coach you through passing these exams. We won't give you the answers, but we'll make sure you know the subject material well enough.
Yeah.
I have, with two of my partners, I've actually ended up on one-on-ones with multiple people in their staff.
Yeah.
The way that I go through it is I make them go take the practice exam, and then I'll look at that and say, okay, you're weak here, go read these things. And as of right now, I've got about 100% pass rate. I actually have 100% pass rate on that.
Good for you. I do a lot of the same for my partners, and I don't have that rate. I have a good rate, but not that rate. Good for you.
Well, I mean, I did write the case studies, so there is that.
And they were good. Like I said, I really do like them. So I just want to, I tell as many people as I can. And one of my goals this year is going to get more people to take that exam. Because I think it's something that anybody who's doing services delivery should have somebody that's passed that on their staff. If they're doing service.
Yeah,
if they're doing design and delivery, they should have somebody on their staff that's done a VMCA.
Yeah, it's the VMCA is no longer about can you read a log. It's more about, okay, the customer changed this design parameter. How would you adjust?
Yeah,
these are real world things that you need to know. If a customer takes their backup window from 12 hours to 8, what Veeam components is it going to affect and how is it going to affect it? So,
yeah.
And by the way, with regard to the VASPs, this is something as soon as we got into this, a lot of the guys went through the VMCA training, and I've been coaching them to great success. In fact, at one of my partners, literally everybody who took the test passed.
Nice.
So yeah, it's been pretty fulfilling. I'll say that. So it gives me a warm feeling in my heart that I know that it's working. Plus, they're doing it the Veeam. That's really, if I was to boil that exam down to anything, is do you know how to deliver things the Veeam way? That's really what that one kind of comes down to for me.
I agree, and that's what I loved it for from my own personal standpoint.
Yeah, and again, as a VASP partner, we're going to make sure you can do it the Veeam way. So I can't imagine anybody would have a problem with the exam after enough time in the trenches for sure. Definitely.
I agree. Well, Michael, thank you so much for all this information today. I mean, we covered a ton of stuff about partners and VASP and service delivery and VMCA. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with us, and I look forward to speaking with you again very soon.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
This has been Veeam Partner Perspectives with Eric Doherty. Thank you for listening.